Villa have done it. They have went out into the market and they have went out and got themselves a marquee transfer. The Monchi Unai Emery era is really going up another level in this transfer window as they prepare to do better in the league than they did last season, as well as juggle those European fixtures as well. And we've got to have a look at how Villa are lining up at the moment and where the missing pieces of the puzzle or the weak links in the chain could be. And on the channel joining us to do that is the one and only Sam Tighe, the football guy. Sam, good to see you, my man. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you, mate. It's been too long, hasn't it, since we've recorded together? Sorry, I've been so busy over the summer, but it's good to be back in your warm embrace once again.
That's it. Sam Tighe is the man in demand at the moment, and I think I can speak for everyone in the community. It says, like, we all have ear-to-ear smiles, mate, seeing you doing all that stuff and kicking ass, so well done, mate. And yeah, we've been trying to get back together to talk Villa. Really, I think since Monchi and Emery and all that kind of came in, my attention's been over there a lot more. And I know you're a Villa till you die, up the Villa and all that kind of stuff. So it was one that was in the offing, and then this pre-season has just made it a wee bit more interesting and a wee bit more interesting. And then boom, Moussa Diaby lands. 60 million euros, I think, is the fee.
Yeah, 55 plus bonuses, maybe up to 60. It's whichever way you want to cut it. It's a pretty eye-watering fee for a club like Villa. Look, Villa are rich. Like to be clear, for those that don't know, Villa are very rich. The owners are worth like a combined like 7 or 8 billion. And if you were to do a league table of owners' wealth, Villa are sitting in that sort of top 6, top 5. I don't know exactly where they are now that Newcastle have stormed into the conversation, but they're rich and the owners are very ambitious. There's been a structural change at Villa this summer. Christian Purslow has stepped down from the operations side of things. He's done a really good job of getting Villa from the Championship back up into the upper echelons of the Premier League, but he's now stepped away. Part of this, I think, had been written earlier this season when his choice for manager, Steven Gerrard, did not pan out very well, and the owners took it upon themselves to seek out Unai Emery and essentially insert themselves into that situation and pick their man. And I think from that moment, maybe, along with Monchi coming in, Perslow's role changed / evaporated. But this is the owners throwing about their wealth and their ambition. They go out and they go and find a manager that they think is brilliant. They go and pair him with a sporting director in Monchi that Unai Emery has worked with before and has such a great reputation. And then they furnish the squad with 30, 40, 50 million pound players. It's just ambitious. And of course, they need the players, Quinny, because European football midweek, it's grueling, it's tough. It's going to add to the load. You need the players, but you need quality.
Yep. And if there's one guy that's been the course and knows how to do that, it's definitely Big Unai himself. But the thing with Monchi as well, for anyone that's not totally up to speed, is he is, like, for me anyway, like one of the football godfathers of like Moneyball, like knowing the right price to buy a player and the right time to sell them as well, is that kind of side of the market is very underestimated in, and like I think Raja Nainggolan, when he sold him at Roma for like mega money, was a really good example of that. But it's good to see that they're spending money to get some good big players into Villa to help them kind of move in and tackle both sides of that ambition, as it were, in Europe and domestically. And the starting 11 that we see at Villa now, or at least the best 11, is really starting to flesh out. And the midfield and the forward line is now, with Moussa Diaby in there, it's definitely been up a level for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, so the team you've got on the pitch right now is missing Jacob Ramsey, who's in the best 11, no doubt. But he's injured, did his metatarsal in the under-21 Euros. Still got a winner's medal, so that's cool. But he'll be missing for the start of the season, as will Alex Moreno, who is the starting left-back and someone who sort of propels himself up the pitch. Great speed. And Villa sort of slow the game down and then release him into space, and he goes charging forward, and he's been really, really good since signing. So actually, Quinny, the entire starting left side from last season is injured for the beginning of the campaign, which is it's not great, is it, in terms of preparation? It's not great. But Luca Dean is certainly the most expensive backup left back in the Premier League, and might be one of the best. And he can step in and do the job. And my prediction would be that we see Emi Buendia start left mid to begin the campaign, because that role, it requires a lot of defensive ethic. Unai Emery has been trying to play central midfielders there, really, where possible. McGinn has played a load of time on the right-hand side. Buendia has played a bit on the left. Ramsey, obviously, is more of a number 8, you would imagine. He plays on the left-hand side. There's a lot of defensive onus on these players. They need to get back and help their fullback, and they need to work all the way back to basically their own third, sometimes nearly their own box. And it does beg the question, Quinny, while Moussa Diaby is a winger, does he actually play on the wing for Aston Villa, or would he play as the support to Ollie Watkins?
Yeah, because across all these different iterations of Unai Emery teams, there's always been like a number one goal scorer, but there is always a really strong supporting act. And one of the things you always see with Emery is he does like pace, and he is really good at putting, the right players in the right positions. And I know I seen a little scoff from you earlier when I mentioned Nangolan, so I'll give you another one you might scoff at. He done with Lamela, kind of similarly, where he's not a great player, but
I was not scoffing. I just remembered. I just thought. I just remember the deal, and didn't he sell Rajan Angolan for like a decent fee and get Nico Zaniolo chucked in as well as an extra spare part? Like, yeah, what a deal! He got like 35 million and Zaniolo. That's why I was smirking, because it was a masterstroke.
I thought maybe I'd misquoted maybe something, and I was like, oh no, Sam's got me on this somewhere. But no, totally. Likewise, in like Seville, the example that comes to my mind is Eric Lamela, who was a bit of an outcast for a large period, and even though he didn't really do great at Seville, but with Emery, when he was back in there, like he found a bit of a tune out of him, and it's that kind of tale is more about putting the right people in the right spots. And Moussa Diaby is just pace, really good technically, like one-on-one can beat a man in the dribble. It's really he's good enough with both feet that you can find him on the left or on the right, really. He's definitely got strengths and weaknesses on both sides, but he's very versatile. So when you've got a guy like Watkins, it's very firmly in this kind of goal mouth zone with kind of pace and on the counter attack. Having a guy that can just arrive in whatever side of the pitch needs him to be in to make that happen is definitely something I could see working out.
Yeah, 100%. Look, one of Diaby's best traits is the speed. It's the outright pace that he has. And if you look at this Villa team, Quinny, and stick McGinn back on the right hand flank for a second and just consider this team and take Watkins and Diaby out of the picture, you're looking at a relatively slow team. Okay, let's go with right centre back is Konsa, right back is Matty Cash, who's not slow, but he's not that fast. Without Alex Moreno, this is quite a slow team. And so one of the big things for Aston Villa moving into the summer was to find another forward, yes, but they had to be quick. They had to offer that pace. They had to find speed outside of Ollie Watkins and Alex Moreno at points. Otherwise, the team would be too slow to enact, I think, what Unai Emery wants to do, which is slow the game down and then bang, into action. 2-3 passes, scything through the lines. And we saw this, Sunday night, they played Newcastle in a pre-season friendly, and it was, as soon as they get that first ball through, break the lines into Douglas Luiz or Boubacar Kamara, oh man, the speed that they attack with, it's absolutely frightening. And the other point to make here with Diaby is, if you put Watkins and Diaby level in a front two, what Unai Emery asks from his midfielders there, Ramsey and McGinn, is to come inside and they create basically a midfield box. And this is kind of the thing that a lot of people are doing at the moment. We see Manchester City create a midfield box. You see Barcelona create it using Gavi inverting. Trent obviously helps create a box for Liverpool. Arsenal are doing it with Zinchenko inverting. Everybody seems obsessed with creating the midfield box. And the reason is because you get 4 players in the middle of the park. So you typically outnumber a 4-3-3 and you just get a numerical superiority. So you get possession. But Villa do this. Villa switch Ramsey and McGinn inside and have them receive in very central areas. Yes, it creates then room for the fullbacks to go forward. They get loads of players in the middle of the pitch. It helps you counter press. So if you lose the ball high up, you can step forward and win it back, and you can defend the center of the pitch. You can also retain the ball really nicely. That's another reason why, if Diaby is playing off Watkins rather than wide, maybe puts him in a slightly better position or more natural position rather than stepping all the way in and being part of the possession structure.
Yeah, because he is definitely a guy you want to have limited touches on, because Diaby, as much as I agree he's got supreme quality and he really is a high ceiling player, but he does split opinion amongst Bundesliga and Leverkusen fans. He's definitely a guy that has had hot and cold patches in his career. And when you look at the Villa team and you see Leon Bailey and what he's produced following that same path, what kind of Diaby will we actually get is maybe a part of this as well. I think he'll probably be a guy that enjoys, similar to Nkunku when he went to Leipzig, being the main guy, at the team. Because at Leverkusen, he's one of the main guys, but there's a few there that are probably fighting for that. Whereas at Villa, he's got the big price tag, he's the new signing, and at the moment, he's the star attacker alongside Watkins, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is a little bit of fear actually in the Villa fan base that, Villa have gone and bought a Leverkusen winger because the last one really hasn't worked out. Leon Bailey has been very inconsistent, very injury prone, sparsely available, unable to gain momentum, and therefore quite disappointing at times. So when you go and, try to fix that by buying another one from the same club, people go, oh God. But what I will say is this: I think Diaby is a clearly superior player to Leon Bailey, clearly superior, and I think he's ready for this move. And he doesn't have a particularly bad injury history or anything like that. He's tended to stay fit. He's tended to be relatively consistent in terms of output. Yes, he goes through hot and cold patches. He's a winger, Quinny. They all do it, right? I mean, unless you're Arjen Robben or Eden Hazard, in fact, even Hazard has it, you are going to go a little bit hot and cold unless you are the very best of the very best. And so that's to be expected. It's just part of it with Diaby. But he feels ready for this move. And he feels like a Champions League standard player, like very comfortably a Champions League standard player. So maybe I'm talking myself into the deal, but I've always loved him, mate. I've always loved him, even coming through, even pre-Leverkusen. I was watching him for the French youth teams, and I just fell in love with his dribbling style. And again, it's what marks him out as different to Leon Bailey. Bailey can't ride contact. Bailey gets hit and he goes down. Now, sometimes that's good. Sometimes, you can win set pieces off that. But sometimes it really ruins your flow. And you really need a winger to ride the contact and keep moving and keep driving, play the advantage and actually make use of it because you're in transition. Bailey can't do this, really. He just goes down. He's not strong enough. But I think Moussa Diaby does. I used to compare his dribbling style to that of a little bowling ball because he was small, compact, powerful, and just ran at players really aggressively, rode the contact, squeezed through these little gaps. I've always been so impressed by him, coming off the right-hand side on the left foot. So to then, probably 3 or 4 years later, see him move to Villa is like, it's genuinely like, I was trying to think, is there a more exciting signing in my lifetime? I just don't know if there is, mate. Like, maybe Douglas Luiz, but Douglas Luiz was far from proven when he joined Villa. I don't think he'd ever played in the Premier League at that point or at a top level. He might have done a loan at Girona and then played really well at the Toulon tournament. We're talking about a completely different caliber of player here in Moussa Diaby.
Yeah, big time. No, I agree. And I think I was very much before the season we've just finished, for me it was a season where I started going, okay, well, Diaby's numbers are not slowing down, they're getting better, and I'm kind of I might need to revisit, because I think the seasons before, especially, I definitely wasn't totally sold on him, but the performance he had that season there, it was elite. It was thoroughly fantastic, so if he is on an upward trajectory, and I say Unai Emery, I think he's very good with players like this at bringing them up to the level he needs them to be at, to compete at the level he needs them to, and to do the job that they need to. And we've looked at how versatile this potential forward line is, with only really 2 or 3 different components, because of really how good the midfield is, I think it's safe to say. But it does maybe come to the question that if you take Watkins out of this, then, there's maybe a lot of trouble at hand, because Archer is obviously coming through the youth ranks, had a good Euros tournament as well, by all accounts. But when we're talking about Champions League level player, or John Duran's on the bench there as well, maybe he gets a loan, you were saying to me before we came on, there's not anyone else. It's clearly if Watkins needs a break or he's suspended or injured, this is the guy that will play yet, is there?
No, and you know this situation, Quinny. It's difficult. I call it the Harry Kane paradox. And it's what Spurs have been stuck with for nearly a decade, and Villa are starting to approach this point too. They have a striker who is really, really good. He's perfect for the system. He's really productive. He works well for you in so many different areas of the game and so many facets of play that while you're not reliant on him, he is incredibly important as a cog. Then you're like, right, if he goes down, we're in trouble. So let's go and find another player that can step in. All right, so you want to go and find a player as good as Ollie Watkins that can go and step in only when Watkins isn't available. And who's, by the way, his durability is exceptional and his injury record is almost spotless. Like, he's typically 35 Premier League starts a season. Like, he's very, very good at that. And he plays 90s as well. So where are the minutes for this new guy? Yeah, and if you're a player that's good enough to go and play in place of Watkins, you're probably wanting a starting spot. So are you going to accept, that second fiddle role? Possibly not. Possibly not. And can Villa genuinely afford to part with the fee it would take for a player who they want to be second choice? Now, I know that the meaning of the phrase second choice takes on a slightly different slant when you're playing in Europe and you have a lot of minutes. You've 3 cup competitions. But it's tough, mate. It's going to be really tough for them to find the answer here. And early in the summer, I was convinced that the answer was Nicholas Jackson. This was before, obviously, Chelsea signed him. But you know how sharp this Nicholas Jackson rise has been. I think we're all quite surprised that Chelsea have decided to go for him this early, despite only playing really one actual season at the top level. Really late starter. Sure. Nicholas Jackson is a player who can play centre forward or wing to about an equal degree of ability. And I thought the real answer here is staring Villa in the face. It's to go and buy a player that can play wide if Watkins is fit or fill in when he's up front. And that, I think that's where they got to go. Obviously, it can't be Nicholas Jackson anymore, but they need to go and find another one of those players, I think, because that backup forward for Watkins, he needs to have utility elsewhere to be remotely worth the sort of figures we'd be talking about here. And on to Archer briefly before I throw it back to you. Look, he's great. He's a hell of a finisher, a proper number 9. I don't know if you know this, but his little nickname is the Walsall Defoe because of the area he hails from and the shooting technique, the ball striking, the ability to finish from all different locations within sort of 20 yards. He is a seriously natural finisher, but he's very inexperienced. He's got a year of championship football under his belt. If Watkins was out for 15 games, would Villa be able to hit their heights and hit their aspirations if Archer had to step in? We just don't know. It's a big risk to run. So that's why you keep him at the club, but you might need an extra player there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And looking at the squads, it's a pretty busy squad Villa have got on their books at the moment, particularly in the forward areas. Archer was the first name that comes to my mind, because otherwise, some of these other guys that are technically still on the books at Villa, Wesley, Keenan Davis, Bertrand Traore, all these guys feel like their days are numbered for the most part.
Yeah, Wesley, I mean, I feel so sorry for him. He had his leg broken in a game against Burnley in his first Premier League season. I think that was New Year's Day 2020. This was quite a long time ago. He missed an entire year with a knee reconstruction. He's just looked pretty dreadful, mate, honestly, ever since. And look, I watched a lot of second division Spanish football last season because I support Granada. And I've got a Jorge de Frutos, so I was watching a fair bit of Levante. And, Wesley was on loan at Levante. Not up to it, mate. Not up to it. Spanish second division. And I'm sat there going, not up to it. So I just don't think I'll ever see him play for Villa ever again. And I think we can say the same for Keenan Davis as well after an okay loan at Watford. Villa presumably need to move wages off the books and probably need to try and generate a little bit of transfer yield. And they'll make a huge loss on Wesley. It's not really their fault. These things happen in football. But these guys have got to go. And there's a case for Traore to stay just on the basis of numbers and amount of games. But he's not on the pre-season tour. And as far as I know, he's not injured. So what's going on there? Possibly just shipping him off somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting season for Aston Villa. And this Diaby transfer, I don't think it's going to be the last one. Pau Torres was a huge acquisition as well. I think it was a real statement of intent along with Diaby. Like you say, firm Champions League level players coming into a team that will be playing, Europa League, as well as going and pushing on further on. So, like we gave credit to earlier in the show, these guys, Monchi and Emery, they're so smart with the way that they play their money ball, very similarly to the other teams in the Premier League that received plaudits for it last year, Brenton and Brentford, and that they know what works for the actual on-pitch tactics that they're going to try and get out of the players. You know, they need a guy that's this quick, that's this good at passing, etc. So I think it'll be really interesting to see. And like any other striker option that does come in there, I think you're spot on, because even with Ramsey, I think Ramsey, when I seen him play, I went to Villa Park last year to see Villa against Crystal Palace, and Ramsey and wee boobs, as I call them, wee camera, they were fantastic. They both ran the game. I loved watching the pair of them as a pair. So I think in the best team you'll find Ramsey and these kind of guys, but Diaby and Watkins, even by themselves, like we've spoken about Watkins there, what if he goes down? What if Diaby goes down, you know, as well? You know, so there is still definitely need some for some more depth up there. And if Diaby is the calibre that Villa are looking to bring in now, then, you know, I think it's going to be a really exciting season. Villa, for me, is probably neck and neck with Spurs in my reckoning for dark horse surprise team of the season, if you get me.
Well, what does that mean? Are you pimping top 4 here?
Like top 5,
right?
Top 6 kind of vibes, you know, like to really upset the apple cart. Like someday will have a great season and you'll be like, wow, there will be a team up there. I think Newcastle have maybe got a case of being that for last season. I know they've got the money and whatever, but to do that top 4 in the first season, I think that was a bit of an overachievement for them. And anyway, I think Villa are definitely looking strong to kind of do something special this year in the league.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult not to believe that when you watch them go out and like really quite aggressively acquire players of the caliber that they're acquiring. Like if you go and sign Moussa Diaby and you put the money down on the table for that kind of player, like it's a statement of ambition and intent, and you really can get sucked in quite easily to that, especially when you consider just how good Villa have been since Emery was appointed, 3rd best team in points per game from the point where he was appointed. You know, something like 2.2 points per game over the course of 2023. It's like, it's absurd. Obviously, it can't stay like that. Like no one thinks that Villa are genuinely on paper the 3rd best team in the league, and it's getting harder and harder to finish in that top 4, top 5, top 6. But they're clearly very good, like very good, legitimately, and no one can really argue against that. So when you then see that platform, and you go, okay, now we've added this, and now we've added this player. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic to watch, and I think what I'm most relieved about from Villa's perspective is they've had a horrible hit rate on trying to find players for about £20 million over the last few years. Like you flick back onto that squad and you look at, you know, Wesley at 20 odd million. You go to, you know, into the midfield, you've got like Bertrand Traore at about 20 odd million. You've got Morgan Sanson at like 15 or 18 or something like that. Like Villa took a lot of shots in this area and not very many of them have worked out. So they've gone, right, screw that. Let's go into the next price bucket. let's go 30 and above. Let's hit 50. Let's just go and sign like clearly excellent players rather than sort of taking like mid-range gambles on these players. And like the squad itself, there's quite a lot of players in it, but there's not a lot of players that Unai Emery actually wants to use. And he spent most of January trying to get rid of half of them. And he only signed John Duran as a project. He didn't buy anyone else because the right deal didn't come up. And there was no need for Villa to sign yet another £15 million player who probably wasn't good enough, but we need the numbers. So Emery ran with like a skeleton squad of 14 players, very lucky with injuries, and got it done. Now they're avoiding the mistakes of the past and just going, nah, let's just go aggressive. Let's just buy let's buy these proper players. And at some point, you know, you've got to make that step. And it is a risk, but now is the right time, and it's looking good. I mean, the Diaby signing is just like I can't wipe the smile off my face, Quinny, for the last 3 days. You know, I just can't.